Further ado, we have a great honor of having with us Rabbi Jason Weiner, who's the chaplain in Cedar Sinai, and we're very happy and fortunate to have him over there, and he benefits the community tremendously. Thank you very much for joining us. You want to stand? Or you want to sit? Stand.
Express my gratitude to Rabbi for putting together this program, beautiful program, and we also, as a community, to have Rabbi Weiner, not just in his capacity of being the senior rabbi and senior chaplain at Cedar Sinai, but as a great resource for Rabbanim to understand what's going on there, and also for the whole community. Not that he isn't busy already, but people should understand that it's not simple to have, most hospitals, we don't have that access. With Rabbi Weiner there, we know that things are being done with the sensitivity to human needs and to Halacha. To have that combination is very, very special, and people should use Rabbi Weiner and use that resource that we have. It's a tremendously special opportunity to have him here. You have a question?
Well, I wanted to just make a statement.
Yeah.
I work in a dialysis center. I'm a registered dietitian, and we're finding that insurance companies are pushing DNRs on some of our younger patients who are stable, who are healthy, but they need dialysis because their kidneys have failed. And I had a POC with a doctor on Monday who was absolutely outraged at the fact that some of his younger patients were getting DNRs. And he wanted that stopped. I mean, that was just, this is not a Jewish environment, obviously these are not Jewish patients, but so this feeling about DNRs it's something that's across the board. It's not just among Jewish people. It's like, hold off. Let's completely evaluate the patient in order to make that.
Thank you for that comment.
Thank you. We're not surprised. It's unbelievable.
We're going to share more facts on the ground, I think, in these areas. It's quite shocking. Hanukkah is about the culture kampf. That culture kampf still continues.
Do you mind if we stand here?
Sure. Why don't we?
Can we move
Just one more quick technical note. There is the mincha today will take place here in the Beis Medrash at 1:05 or 1:05. 1:05. There will be another mincha. It's at 12:35. Please we're asking those that are in the shir not to walk out of the shir for that mincha. It's covered for the speakers. So at 1:05, mincha is right here, and the other mincha will take place upstairs. We are absolutely makbid that mincha not take place in the back. If you see somebody congregating there, please tell them to go upstairs because it will interfere with the program here. It's a pleasure and honor to introduce Rabbi Weiner to share with us.
Thank you. It's great. It's really, really a pleasure to be here. I'm a huge fan of Link and Rabbi Brander and Rabbi Lepar, two of my favorite rabbis around, and so it's really quite an honor to speak with all of you. After having heard a shir, I really apologize that I was late and then I'm going to have to leave after, so I really would have loved to hear Rabbi Lepar's shir, and I'm going to find the recording. And after Rabbi Lepar gives a shir, I'm not going to try to give a shir as well. I would have nothing to add, of course. So my goal is more to share some experiences in the hospital and just to share a little bit about what I see and what some of the dilemmas are and some of the challenges, and just to give you a kind of a feel for some of the issues that we face on the ground. But of course, for Shilas and for Psak, of course, you have Rabbi Lepar, Rabbi Brander, and others here that you can
Chaim
turn to.
Aruchim. I don't pass Kedisha. 718 Chaim Aruchim.
There's excellent resources. But like Rabbi Brander said, though, if I can ever be helpful to anyone in the hospital in any way, just in terms of navigating things, please never hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to try to help. Just as I start to think about some of the stories that are related to what we're talking about, I could spend the whole time telling stories, which I won't do, but I remember a case that I had once where I got a call from someone. I didn't know who it was. I remember I answered the phone. I remember the words were, Rabbi, I'm just changing very minor details, but she said, Rabbi, you performed my grandmother's funeral, and now I have to ask you to perform my daughter's funeral. And I didn't even know. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Tell me what's happening. And she says, well, my daughter had a sudden brain aneurysm, and she's in the county hospital, and the doctors say there's no chance of recovery, and they're giving us pressure to extubate, and of course, they say she's suffering, and we don't want her to suffer. But I am an observant Jew. I told them I can't do it without my rabbi's permission. Again, I didn't know who. I didn't remember who it was. I'm sure she had another rabbi, I think. But anyways, she was calling me, I think, for permission. And I said to her, well, so when did this happen? She says, yesterday. So I said, she had a brain aneurysm yesterday, and they want to withdraw everything today already? She said, yeah, Rabbi, come on, it's cruel and unusual to make her go through this. What, would you give us permission just so we can tell the doctors our rabbi said yes? So I said, first of all, this is something that I wouldn't be able to say myself. I need to talk to some people. And also, it just seems very fast. One day? So she says, yeah, but the doctors say she's suffering. So I said, could you get another opinion? Could you ask for another opinion? And she says, oh, okay, I'll see what I can do. Next day, she calls me back again. Rabbi, it's really, the doctors say, what are we torturing her for? So I said, what did the second opinion say? She has no chance? They said, we didn't get a second opinion yet. So I said, also, I need to talk to people. I said to her, I remember, it's almost the weekend. Let's give it the weekend. Over the weekend, make sure to get a second opinion. And then call me. Because this is a big issue that I'll mention in a minute. I mean, it is a big problem when people get stuck on a respirator, right? Because halachically we can't take them off. And it does become an issue. So I want to figure out how we're going to help you with this, but I'm not rushing into this. So the weekend goes by, and I was thinking about it a little bit. I was figuring, okay, I'm going to have to call, to call a post-sick and discuss this and figure this out. I'm not sure what we're going to do exactly, but we're not rushing to extubate here. Monday goes by, nothing. Tuesday goes by, nothing. Wednesday, at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I guess maybe they're just calling someone else at this point. I remember Wednesday night, there was an event at the Federation that I had to go to. So I'm there, and there was I don't want to say anything bad. I'm not trying to say anything bad to anyone. There was a rabbi who's not Orthodox that I saw there. And this rabbi comes over to me and says, oh, you're the rabbi at Cedars. What a wild case they had at Children's Hospital, at the county hospital, wasn't it? So I said, which case? I started describing, oh yeah, they called me last week. And they said, isn't it amazing? I said, what's amazing? They didn't call me back. What happened? They said, oh yes, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. I said, what do you mean? They said, oh, they called me on the weekend, and they said, the rabbi at Cedars is too Orthodox. He wouldn't let us. So would you say it's allowed? Because come on, the patient's suffering. Would you allow it? So this rabbi said, yeah, it's fine. So luckily, in hospital, I'm not trying to say anything bad. I'm just trying to show different perspectives. Sure. But okay, fine. Maybe I am in a nice way. I'm trying to be nice about it at least. So
Israeli and the American.
I'm still saying it. Don't worry. But I'm just trying to be political. So, anyways. Luckily in hospitals, this is a problem in all hospitals, it's at Cedars too, but everywhere, the problem is weekends. Weekends and holidays are very inefficient days in hospitals. You have a hard time when you putting in orders, things take longer, just less efficient, less people are around, and it's a big problem financially even with hospitals. They lose money on the weekends because they order something on Friday, nothing happens till Monday. So on Saturday, this woman tells the doctor, yeah, you know what, it's fine, we're gonna withdraw all care. But the order gets put in, nothing happens Saturday, nothing happens Sunday. Still Monday, nothing's happening. Monday afternoon, the mother starts to notice, you know what? I think there's some improvement. Is it just wishful thinking? I don't know. She says to the doctors, the respiratory therapists come to extubate. She says, I'm second thinking myself now. Maybe we shouldn't do this so quickly. Say, well, if you want to get a second opinion, we can order that. So they get a second opinion. It takes another day. By then, there was some improvement. Now, brain aneurysms with blood, it's a blood bleed, a brain bleed with blood, right? Did I say correct? So the blood can recede also. So what they were seeing was that the brain bleed was receding. It was improving. And by Wednesday, this patient had woken up. That day, when this rabbi saw me, this was the miracle, right? They say, oh, it was a miracle because we said you take it out, and then they survived. And to make a long story short, the woman and the patient came to my office like 2 months later. The patient literally walked in, and the mother said, I want you to meet the patient whose life you saved. Now, I know I'm not just trying to be modest here. It wasn't me that saved her life. It was Halacha. I would never have told her when she first called me, don't do it so quickly if it wasn't for the fact that Halacha forbids this, right? Of course, medically, also when I talk to some people, it was also right medically. I mean, what's the rush? Some things, they take time and you need to. So this is a big issue. On the other hand, I'll try to give you different perspectives. On another extreme, when we talk about DNR and extubation, there was a case that I remember because it impacted me a lot, where there was a family, and I apologize, I'm trying to change my details. It's very possible that some of these stories are happening or about people that you might know, but I did change details with that last story. I'm changing with this story as well, but the gist you get. There was a family that their approach was DNR is always usher no matter what. They were not allowed DNR. So, in fact, the patient, at one point, the patient was, at this point, an adult, weighed less than 80 pounds, was really in the dying process, and the doctor was explaining that resuscitation at this point would only break ribs. It had no chance. Until this point, the code had been full code, resuscitate. At this point, it was not going to work. The patient would die. The son of the patient, the doctor says this, stood up and said, yeah, well, if you don't resuscitate my parent, I will grab your hands and I will force you to do it. So you could cut the tension with the knife for that moment. So the doctor then gets up. He had a lot of chutzpah, this doctor. He's a Jewish doctor. He gets up and he says, what a shame that you're not going to be here for your parents' last moments. I'm going to call security now. And he walked out. Meanwhile, the child of the patient's literally shaking. And I remember I put my hands on his shoulders. He almost hit me. And I said, maybe we should call your rabbi. So he said, my rabbi told me, do everything always. So I said, well, maybe in this case, let's call the rabbi and say this situation. He said, what, you say my rabbi's wrong? So I said, chas v'shalom. But every case is different. Let's call. So we called the rabbi. The rabbi said, yes, that's what I said. Do everything always. So I said, here's the case. This patient has cancer all over her body. Got her. She's not even interacting anymore. Weighs less than 80 pounds now. She weighed 200 pounds before. She's dying. The doctors think she has a day, 2 days at the most. They're not even willing to do it. So the rabbi said, oh, in that case, yes, the DNR would be allowed in that case. So the son said, oh, okay. Can we call the doctor back and tell him not to call security? So, it's sometimes this case, of course, in general, and I'm not sure, I didn't hear what Rabbi Lepar said, everything, but in general, we do err on the side of prolonging life. Of course, we err on the side of not having a DNR, what we call full code. But of course, it's case by case, there's situations. And so we can't just have a very simple rule. We have to call the rabbi, call the posek, and figure out each case as they arise. I remember another case a similar case where a patient, the family's demand always was DNR is against Halacha. We are against DNR. We're having family meetings, we were navigating, and everything was DNR is off the table. One day a child of the patient comes to my office and says, Rabbi, how do we make sure that my loved one is no code? Now, no code is how we say in the hospital, DNR. So I said, I'm really confused. What do you mean? I thought the whole goal was no DNR. They said, no, we want no code. We don't want DNR. We want no code, though. So I said, no code means DNR. I'm confused. They said, let me explain to you. I don't know what I'm saying, this person. I don't know medical language. I don't know what I'm saying. Let me explain to you. We've been saying DNR is against Halacha, so we don't want it. Then the patient in the room next to us coded. Coded means their heart stopped. And we watched what happens. We watched them pounding on the chest and intubating and doing everything, and there was blood everywhere, and they were screaming, and then the patient died. It took an hour and a half. And we said, we don't want that. So whatever that was, we don't want. So now we said, okay, we need to call your rabbi and discuss this, because there's things that we can do, and there's things that we don't want to do. We have to figure out what we want and what we don't want. Sometimes it's not always so bloody and scary. Sometimes it is. It's all case by case. I hope this is in accordance with what Rabbi Lepar said. I mean, we have general rules. Like I said, we err on the side always of prolonging life, and we want to keep people alive. We have to know the specifics in each case about exactly what we're doing. The real dilemma that comes up, the most common dilemma, probably if you had to ask me what's the most common shaila that happens in the hospital, is with extubation. When someone is intubated, first of all, the question of when to intubate, when do we put in the breathing tube, the endotracheal tube that's connected to the respirator that helps them breathe, and when do we take it out? The dilemma is usually most significant. First of all, putting it in. I'll give you an example of a shaila that we had. I got called to the emergency room that a patient had dementia and choked at home. choking is really the most common cause of death in dementia patients. It's not clear if it's a terminal illness, it sort of is, but usually they don't die from the dementia, they die from a result of it. Patient chokes at home. So the patient had been very clear with his family. It was really end-stage dementia. He had been clear throughout his illness that he does not want to be on artificial life support. But of course, he also said, I want to follow halacha. So you'll ask the rabbi, and if the rabbi says, you'll do what the rabbi says. But if I have a choice, I don't want it. Patient comes in, and what they did in the ambulance, when they resuscitate someone, what they call in hospitals is bagging. They were bagging the patient. That means that they have the endotracheal, they're intubated, but they're not connected to a respirator because you don't have a respirator in someone's house or even in an ambulance. The nurse or the tech or the EMT bags the patient. They pump a bag every 5 or 6 seconds to keep them oxygenated, and they do chest compressions. So the question became: they get to the emergency room, the nurse is still bagging. They're not on a respirator yet. The question the wife has is, okay, he doesn't want to be on a respirator, he doesn't have to be, but of course, if it's beneficial, we'll do it. She's waiting now. The doctors are going to do tests to determine how bad was the brain trauma from not breathing. It had been a while before the paramedic got there. It's like 10, 15 minutes before they did anything. So it could be very, very severe brain trauma, such that there's no chance for meaningful recovery. We wouldn't necessarily extubate someone in that case. We definitely wouldn't. But the question is, would we put them on the respirator, right? So the doctor came back. They did their imaging. The doctor said the brain trauma is very severe. I do not see any chance for meaningful recovery. This person's brain trauma is so bad they might live, but they will not be able to interact in any way whatsoever. So the wife felt, well, in that case, this is what he said. He did not want to be put on a respirator. So she felt, I don't want to put him on. But the question was, he's being bagged right now. So he is intubated, and there's a bag pumping every 5 seconds or so. So a respirator is one thing. To take a person off a respirator, you have to withdraw. We say in halacha usually, you can withhold interventions sometimes, but you cannot withdraw them if withdrawing leads to death. What was this case? Is the withdrawal, first of all, is it withdrawal? Because you're not pumping every second. You're pumping not pumping constantly. It's every 5 seconds or so. So can they stop pumping? This was the shaila. So she asks me. Of course, this is obviously something that I could. This is really dinning a fashos mamish, and this is for a posting. So I don't know if I want to give everyone's names because I don't know if I asked them permission. But I called a very prominent posek who I call for my shilas here in town. I assume he would give me permission, but I'm just not going to. You all know him. I asked him, "What do we do in this case?" He said, "Wow, this is a hard one." I said, well, they need to know now. I'm calling you from the emergency room, and the nurse has been pumping for 2 hours now. So he said, I need 5 minutes. I said, okay, we really need to know now. Luckily, one great thing about this posting in particular is that not only is he always available, he does call back. He says he's going to call back, he calls back. So I said to them, 5 minutes. He calls me back in 5 minutes, and he says, I think it would be mutter to stop the pumping in between pumps. If this is a case, the doctor's telling you there's no chance for meaningful recovery, this is a patient who's in the dying process, they're terminal, they're chai shah, it would be allowed to stop the pumping. Because it's not withdrawing, it's withholding. It's like stopping a code. Just like if someone's resuscitating and after 2 hours, they're not being revived, there's a certain point where you can stop. It's sheva tase, it's not actually withdrawing. So that's what he told me. That's what I told them. They stopped, and that night, late at night, the patient died. That night also, interestingly, Chaim Aruchim called me. Chaim Aruchim, one thing that I like about them is that they call me all the time when there's a shaila in Cedar Sinai, not to ask for my psak, but because they're very good at saying, if there's a case, we need to know the details. We're not there. We're in Lakewood. We're in Brooklyn. So let's get someone on the ground to report back to us, what do you see? What's happening? Who's this doctor? Some doctors exaggerate in one way. Sometimes doctors exaggerate in a different way. This is why, just as a side point, there's a Rav Hoffman at Weiner Yeshua in Bnei Brak. I spent a day with him once to get to know him, how he's the Rav of their hospital in Weiner Yeshua. Everything in Weiner Yeshua is halacha. It's a Haredi hospital. So much so that when I was with him at one point, he gets an emergency call. He's constantly getting emergency calls. And I'm following him around just watching. Like, wow, one day Cedar Sinai will be like this. And give me another 100 years. So we get this emergency call. What's the emergency? Come to the security booth. I'm thinking, what's the Rav need to pass into the security booth? We show up at the security booth. The security guard's there, and he says, Kvod Arav, this woman's trying to bring in food for her daughter. I stopped her though. Don't worry, I stopped her. And she's crying, my daughter is so sick and she only eats my cookie. She's not eating the hospital food. Please, it's pekuach nefesh. So the rabbi says, okay, don't use our plates. Don't tell anybody that I gave you permission, and it's just this one time. And he lets her through. The security guy says, thank you, Rabbi. He goes on. I thought, wow, this is the job. The security booth there at this hospital, they're not checking for bombs and guns. They're checking to see if something's not mahadrin. They're checking the hashgach on there. So he told me, one thing he told me, just as a side, I'm mentioning this because he's told me that, they have Rav Chaim, right, in Bnei Brak. And I asked him, I said, what's the involvement of the Gedolim in the hospital? Because they all are on the official, Halacha committee. But he said to me that even Rav Chaim has a rule that if someone asks him a halacha medical shaila, Rav Chaim won't paskin until Rav Hoffman is involved with the case. Rav Hoffner, sorry. Or the posting of the hospital, because they said, when someone says the doctor said X or Y, Rav Chaim, all he hears is that's what the doctor said. But I know the doctors. I'm working with them every day. So I can give him the full color. I can say, here's what this person said, here's who they are, here's what they mean by this. And because you have to have the details. So anyways, that was a long side point, but I just think it's interesting. Chaim Aruchim calls me that night because they have a shaila in Cedar Sinai. They just want me, they said, could you just go in, see the patient, talk to the doctors, give us your perspective as we have to develop our psak so that we can hear, just hear the whole story. It's the proper way of paskin, right? You do your research. It's responsible. So anyways, I said, I have you on the phone. I had a shaila today. I'm just curious what you would have said because it was a tough shaila. So I told them, they said, we would have said, you have to continue bagging, put him on a respirator. So I felt a little bit bad. I didn't tell the posik that I called, I just felt bad. The next day, that posik, another reason why I respect him, he calls me up and he says, I'm feeling guilty about our psak last night. I'm just feeling funny about it. Could you call Rav Asher Weiss? And I did ask his permission. Could you call Rav Asher Weiss and see what he would say? So I did call him, and he agreed with that posting. So it was a little bit of machlokas poskim, but he agreed that in this case, it's considered shave val tase to stop in between pumps, and that to put on the respirator. So then he gave me a klal. This is this important rule, and he tells me this all the time. This is Rav Asher Weiss's klal gadol in terms of respirators. Because the question is, when do you put a person on? So he says, if the patient, and the truth is I found this afterwards in Rav Sternbach's writing, a little bit worded differently, but the basic same idea in Chuvas and Hagos. He says basically, if a patient will have no chance or very low likelihood of getting off of the respirator, there's not a chiyuv to put them on the respirator. Meaning the point of the respirator is to be a bridge. The respirator, if someone's declining, the respirator can save their decline, help them stabilize, and we have many, many cases where people's lives have been saved because they were put on the respirator, even though the medical team didn't think they had a chance. We did it anyways. Their lives were saved. I can tell you more stories about lives that have been saved, and if we have time, I will, thanks to respirators. But if there is very strong likelihood, very strong, that they will not get off the respirator, and sometimes we have tests that can be done that show us that this person has no chance for a meaningful recovery. Of course, keeping in mind the story that I said before, there were people that said that kid had no chance, and they did. So we're obviously err on the side of caution and saving life. But he tells me if they have no chance of getting off the respirator, see, the concern is as follows. If a person gets on a respirator, the doctors say, now this is a little bit of a machlokas skiing. How do you say researchers and skira? Whatever. It's a machlokas in like the research, but that. They'll tell you in the hospital that you can be on an endotracheal tube, the ventilator, for 2 weeks. That's the rule in the hospital. After 2 weeks, they'll start giving pressure. You have to get off because why? The trachea starts to get infected, it starts to break down, and it can cause all kinds of secondary problems. And so they say our rule is 2 weeks. Now, it's not always the rule, and there are sometimes exceptions. Actually, I remember a case. This is another side point, but hopefully I'm just trying to give you some cases and some background. I remember a case we had, another important issue. There was a woman from the other side of town who collapsed at home, and her caregiver brought her into the hospital. She had an advance directive. Her advance directive said, no artificial life support. It's a dangerous thing to put on an advance directive, right? I think the best thing to put on an advance directive is your rabbi's phone number. That's basically it. There could be some other details, but the main thing is, I'm Jewish, call my rabbi. And if I have very strong feelings about one or two things, you write on there, here's how I feel about certain things, tell the rabbi for the rabbi to decide. That's how we actually wrote. We have a Jewish advanced directive at Cedar Sinai. That's how we wrote it. That's how the Aguda advanced directive is, and also the RCA. Anyways, she collapses. The paramedics come. They take her in, and they intubate her to save her life. Always, when in doubt, in emergency rooms will save life. I mean, that's what the American law is, at least. When in doubt, it's what you're supposed to do. When in doubt, you save life, and then after you deal with the ramifications. In Halacha, though, that can be a challenge because sometimes you save a life, and then they're stuck on a machine. So this woman is now on a machine. Her advanced directive says she does not want to be on it. There might have been a chance for her also to survive. So the doctors started saying, well, we know her opinion. She said her opinion. It's in this document. So we're going to take her off. The family comes in. It was a very religious family. And they said, but this is against Halacha. We called the rabbi. He said no. The doctor said, well, too bad. It's your opinion against her opinion. She's the patient. So they argued, an interesting argument. I mean, we kind of developed this argument in our meetings together. She was a firm woman also. She wrote something that goes against Halacha, but she lived her life in accordance with Halacha. So we argued, if she would have realized that she wrote something against Halacha, she wouldn't have written it. So now we asked her rabbi says it goes against Halacha, so she does not mean what she said. It's kind of a hard argument to make, but you can't ask the person. And even the doctors, from my experience, if you advocate enough for a patient, they don't want to fight, usually. They don't want the fight, they don't want the lawsuit, they don't want the, if you really make the case, there might need to be some compromise, but usually if you really make a strong, respectful, but passionate and informed case, they will say, okay, this is what you want to do. So we had a big problem though, because she's on a respirator. And the family felt we do not want her to be on, to be trached. See, this is what happens. You get 2 weeks, what they say, and sometimes it's longer, 2 weeks on the endotracheal tube. That's the tube that goes down one's throat into the lungs. That's the respirator. After 2 weeks, they say, okay, we can't leave it anymore. You need to be trached. So they extubate and they trach. They drill a hole into someone's trachea and they breathe that way. The truth is, it's more comfortable actually for a patient than imagine having a straw down your throat. In some ways, it's better. It's a minor procedure. It's a surgery, but it's done bedside. It's not the worst thing in the world. And but some people say, you know what? They leave the hospital at that point. They get sent to vent facilities. Like Barlow, there's these places right by Dodger Stadium. You might see that. There's places over there. They're not necessarily the nicest places. And some people feel like, you end up there as a vegetable for 10 years, and people get nervous about that. This family in particular, they said, it's a common issue that people have. They said, we want to keep her alive. We're not okay with extubating. But we don't want to put her on a ventilator, on a trach, and send her to some facility to stay there for 10 years. That's not what we want either. So we said, well, we have a problem because that's your choice. But they said, well, Halacha is we can't, right? So their posek, and the truth is we discussed this with him, I feel like I could share his name. It was Rabbi Cheskel Roth, one of the Satmar Dayanim. Actually, it was during Elul, and during Elul, he goes to Meron for the whole Elul. We had to track him down to Meron. It was like not easy. There was no cell phone or anything. Someone had to go. So they got to him, and he gave a very interesting psak, which we did. His psak was, Shev va'al taseh adif. How do you do Shev va'al taseh? The question is, you leave it in for 2 weeks and then you take it out and the patient dies, or you put him on a trach. There's two choices. There's no Shev va'al taseh.
Leave it in.
Yes, that's what he said. Leave it in. The doctor said, no, you get 2 weeks. So he said, fine, we're okay with taking the risks of those 2 weeks. Just leave it in, keep it in. He said, but it'll get infected. And they said, okay, why is that bad? They said, well, infections are bad. You don't want her to get infected. It would be painful. I said, are there pain medications? I said, yes. I said, could you leave it in and give pain medication? So we convinced the hospital that they did it. Now, this is what happened. They left her in. A lot of the staff at the hospital didn't like that. They thought we were torturing the patient. But we did it for this family to follow Halacha and to hopefully help everyone to kind of navigate this. She was moved to a vent floor where she wasn't on a trach. She kept on the intubation. But what they did was, with their post-6 guidance, when she got the infection, they treated her with pain medication, not antibiotics, and she died that way. It took 2.5 months, and she died on the respirator, still receiving basic nutrition, hydration, and basic and pain medications, but they allowed her to die that way, and they felt comfortable that was not killing her, but allowing her to die.
He said no antibiotics.
Yeah, that's how he guided them. Because he felt this is the only way that we're going to have any kind of compromise in this case. As long as they're not suffering.
Hospital wouldn't have allowed antibiotics,
the hospital would have allowed antibiotics, but it would have been a problem because at a certain point they would have said, okay, we're going nowhere here. Like we have to go in some direction. So once they saw, okay, this is the plan. She's basically on hospice, but on a respirator, and that was the kind of the approach.
In the hospital for like 2 months? Or they working
In the hospital. Now, there's been a change at Cedar Sinai. It used to be 5 South was the vent floor. 5 South, now they transfer these patients out of the hospital. So it would be a little different if it happened today, but it could still be managed. Anyways, that's another example. Yes.
The patient wasn't suffering, so then what should be that?
Okay, the patient was in a coma, right? The patient was not alert. So this is a big machlokas, by the way, with Rosh Shlomo Zalman and Rabbi Elyashiv. Is a coma considered suffering? Rosh Shlomo Zalman felt that a coma is considered suffering, and Rabbi Elyashiv felt that it's not. It's a big nafkamina, because we're supposed to prolong suffering. So to Rabbi Elyashiv, he felt, well, if the person's not suffering, what's the problem? To Rosh Shlomo Zalman and Rav Moshe, if they're suffering, you don't want a person to prolong. You don't want to prolong suffering. The Rav Moshe's klal is basically we do everything we can to prolong life, but we do nothing to prolong suffering. We cannot hasten death, but when someone's suffering, they have no chance of recovery, we can allow the dying process to occur.
So Kasparov must be going in with their path, because if he truly was not suffering, then what would be the not give antibiotics?
Yeah, must be. We didn't discuss that, I didn't talk to him directly. We were just getting this report back and forth. We had like a messenger reporting back to us everything. But yes. So then you have another issue with respirators. So there's other options. You might have heard about the timers on respirators at Shaarei Tzedek. The Tzitz Eliezer wrote a tshuva allowing a person to be put on a timer, because you always have this dilemma. When in doubt with suffix, you want to save life, right? Halachically, in general, I think, but halachically for sure. So when in doubt, we want to save life. But we don't want to prolong suffering. We don't want to prolong the dying process. So there was this idea that came up with the Shaarei Tzedek that Rabbi Elyashiv wrote a tshuva supporting, which was that if someone comes into the emergency room and you're not sure, you put them on a respirator on a timer, and the timer will stop after 24 hours, whatever it is, and you can either decide to, before it stops, renew it to keep the person alive, or you can say, you know what, they have no chance of recovery, therefore, shev al tase, you can allow them to die by not renewing it. He wrote a tshuva allowing it. Some poskim did not agree. Rabbi Elyashiv didn't agree, for example, although it's not clear what he was disagreeing with, because there was different models of the timer, different ways of doing it. For example, Rabbi Elyashiv said you can't do it if you take a person off a respirator and then put them on the timer. But if you start them on the respirator on the timer, then they thought he was okay with it. Rav Sternbuch has a tshuva allowing it. The problem is they have not been able to create the actual technology yet, because you have to have IRB approval to do something like this. You have to do tests. You have to have patients who actually are tested on. And no hospital is willing to test this on patients, because obviously it's dangerous. So they're still trying. I actually just discussed it with Dr. Steinberg last time he was here. They are still trying to create the technology, but it doesn't exist yet. I hear a lot when I hear people talk about this topic, the Shaarei Tzedek timer thing, but it's actually not real yet. It doesn't currently exist. There is another strategy which I will share with you, but again, sharing with you only with the recognition that you have your post game here. This is something you have to discuss with the posting. Dr. Steinberg tells a story as follows. I forgot who it was. Navon, the president of Israel, Navon, right? His wife. When his wife was dying, she was on a respirator. He was Sephardi, right? And he wanted to follow halacha in a certain way. Not that he was dati, but he asked rabbis. And Dr. Steinberg tells the story that when he came to him and said, "My wife is stuck on a respirator. She's been on the respirator now for months. She's not dying because it's keeping her alive, but she's also not going to recover from it. And I feel that this is prolonging the suffering. Is there any way that halacha would allow us to extubate?" So he went to Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he wrote this in his life, in Rosh Shlomo Zalman's lifetime, in his name. The way he tells the story, I'll tell it to you the way he tells the story. Rosh Shlomo Zalman said, there's one way you could do it, which is that if the patient doesn't need the vent settings to be at their maximum settings. The ventilator does two things, right? It gives oxygenation, more than the 21% that is in the air, and it pumps the air. So if she doesn't require as much as it's doing, you can turn it down to the lowest level that she still needs. As long as it's still helping her. But then if she needs more later, you don't have to turn it back up. And as long as she needs less, you can keep weaning it down until it's at the lowest level possible. So that's what they did. So then he wanted to publish this. So he asked Rosh Shlomo Zalman, and Rosh Shlomo Zalman said, ask other poskim and see what they say before you publicize this. So he went to the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner, and Rav Vosner said the same thing. So he said to Rav Vosner, can I publish this? Because this is an important psak, this comes up a lot. He says, I don't know, I'm not comfortable. He says, but Rosh Shlomo Zalman said the same thing. He said, yeah, fine, publish it in his name, not in my name. In the end, he published it in both their names together. But and then, actually, Rabbi Willig often would tell people this eitzah, and Rav Schechter told him that he disagreed with him. So Rabbi Willig felt very bad, because obviously he's going to defer to Rav Schechter. So he did until Dr. Steinberg published this. And this is how Rabbi Willig tells the story. When Dr. Steinberg published this, he said, okay, it's not me anymore. I can tell people to rely on that. That's the thing is, it's not always an option, this weaning off option. It's only in certain cases, and like I said, not all poskim are comfortable with it, something that you have to ask your poskim. It leads to another issue, and I'll start to conclude soon. Another issue that all this stuff with respirators now leads to, now that we have spent all this time being mivarer, all the stuff that's involved with it, and there's a lot more to talk about, another issue came up, a newer issue, and that is total artificial hearts. Cedar Sinai is doing the most heart transplants in the world now. And what happens is if a person needs a heart, they have heart failure, what it means basically is that their heart can't pump strong enough to get their blood throughout their body. So they need a new heart. But you can't always get a heart. You have to wait some time for a heart. But what if someone can't live long enough to get that new heart? So they developed an artificial heart. And it actually, the way to do it, it looks like a heart, but it's plastic. And they have to remove a person's entire heart and replace it with an artificial heart. Now, this is a big decision. If you think getting intubated or not is a big decision, as we discussed before, they actually have to remove a heart. And now the person's life is dependent on that heart. And guess what? Sometimes things happen that make a person no longer a candidate for heart transplant. Let's say we've had cases where someone gets an infection after. And the doctors say, okay, we were not willing to give a valuable heart to this patient who's already has sepsis. And they say, wait a second, then what does that mean for me? This heart can only last for so long. Or they get blood clots, which is common, strokes from these. Or we had a patient once who developed cancer after they got it, and the heart transplant protocols, they need someone to be able to likely live for at least 5 years after they get heart transplant, otherwise they were going to give it to someone else who can use it for longer. And the person goes off the list, and then they have to say, well, what am I going to do with the heart? What am I going to do now? Like, I'm in pain, I'm suffering, I have all these issues, and I have... What?
Can't give his heart back.
Can't give it back. It's gone. They literally turn it off. What do you think happens when they turn someone's heart off? They're gone instantaneously. It's not respirator, at least usually. I'll talk about this in a second. Respirator, usually there's some time. There's a whole another machlokas. Respirator, how long does a person have to be able to live after they're extubated for it to be allowed to extubate them?
How long does it live on the artificial heart?
Artificial heart, it depends. It depends. But let's say
But
someone...
it will be prolonged. Within years, it's going to be as much as an implanted heart.
It could be, but it
It
develops
would
all
be.
these
Not
side
could be,
effects.
It would be, because that's what the technology is
But
all
then they're
about.
getting all these side effects and they're having all these... Oh, no, yes, you're right. In terms of technology, yes. The FDA has even approved what's called destination, that it could be permanent, yes. But still, so what does someone do when they're dying and the only thing keeping them alive is this perfect artificial heart? So we've had patients, I'm not talking necessarily about people asking Halacha questions. We've had patients who literally said, okay, if I have no chance now, then turn it off. And they literally go for a walk with their family, sit down in a chair, and they say, like, they turn them off. And it's instantaneous. And obviously, halachically, this is a very big problem, right? So the question is, even if you're going to put them on in the first place, once you put them on, can you ever turn it off? So if one accepts brain death, so there could be a case where someone becomes brain dead and you turn it off then. If not, and anyways, people aren't brain dead. So how can it be turned off? There is the possibility of the Shea Valtase approach. These have a battery pack. You have to charge them. You think it's important to charge your iPhone, keep your heart charged. But so one option is, when we've actually done this, just allow the charge to run out. But it's a big question. I think I've written articles about this also. Like, does the heart, is it now your heart? Does it become part of your body, or is it external? And this leads to another shayla that I'm just going to bring. I'm just giving some overviews, which is dialysis. It came up before dialysis. Dialysis now, and this we can start comparing and contrasting respirators, artificial hearts, and dialysis. Dialysis is basically does kidney function, right? There's two types. There's CRT, continuous renal replacement therapy, that is constantly, filtering one's blood. Or there's dialysis, which is the most common kind, which is like 3-4 times a week. One does dialysis for a few hours, it filters their blood, does the job of the kidneys, and they go on.
There's also PD.
There's a whole bunch. I'm not going to give too many details. Right. There's a lot more we can talk about. If we want to have a whole medical discussion, I'm not the right one for it, as I'm a rabbi. I only play a doctor. I don't play doctor. So the question becomes in halacha, though, the halachic point is, what about dialysis discontinuation? Because respirator, we said, okay, if someone's vent dependent, right, extubation is a problem. There can be ways that we mentioned. What if someone will live for a few days? Artificial heart, they die right away. Dialysis, though, is cyclical, right? So if it's cyclical, shouldn't it be that in between cycles, one could, b'shei v'al if the patient is in the dying process, and this is prolonging the suffering, they should be allowed. So interestingly, Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach took a different approach. He felt, like the speaker has great articles about this, Rosh Shlomo Zalman felt that the dialysis, even the dialysis, becomes the kidneys, because it's doing the function of the kidney, so it is the kidney, right? Just like if therefore the respirator is the lungs, and the artificial heart is the heart. This is a big debate. Also, by the way, side point, implantable defibrillators. This was a big trial. I think you wrote it to Rosh Weiss. It's published in his Chuvas. That what about a defibrillator that's inside one's chest, but it's only there to activate when one's heart stops? So can you deactivate it while it's not currently on? So apparently Rav Elyashiv ruled on this that you cannot, because it became part of the person's body. Rav Asher Weiss disagreed. He felt that when it's not acting, it's not acting. It's not actually part of the body. I think then Speaker then disagreed with Professor Weiss, right? He had a back and forth. I remember that. But the point is about the kidneys. So Rav Shlomo Zalman said the dialysis machine is the kidneys. Therefore, even though it's off right now, you're not connected to it. You cannot stop dialysis because that is killing the patient, not allowing him to die. When I was at Weiner Yeshua that I spoke about, they were telling me, it was kind of funny actually. Rav Hoffner was telling me, I was telling him about Sha'ar Tzedek. I spent a few weeks at Sha'ar Tzedek at Weiner Yeshua. He said, here at B'nai Brak, we're much more machmir. We don't have all these Yerushalmi kulas. Remember that was his phrase. We don't have all the Yerushalmi kulas that they use there. And then I said, what do you do about dialysis here? He said, dialysis in between cycles we stop if someone's dying. I said, in Yerushalayim they don't stop because not everyone, obviously, but Rosh Shlomo Zalman told the Sha'ar Tzedek not to stop because it replaces the kidneys. So he said, I disagree, because his argument was Rav Moshe Feinstein has a fascinating tshuva, an important tshuva, that people think is not relevant today, but it's very relevant. The question is as follows. I'll tell it with a story. A rabbi came to my office once. We validate parking for the rabbis. That's why that was strategic. That's because we want you to come by our office. But it's important because I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on with people's patients. So a rabbi comes by my office and he's getting his parking validated. I say, what's the story? He says, we have a case with the extubation shaila. The doctors want to extubate. I think halachically, it's a problem. But I'm going to go tell them what to do. It's easy. I said, oh really? Because this is a big challenge. When we have these cases, it's very difficult. What are you going to tell them? He said, what do you mean? It's so pashut. I'm going to tell them what Rav Moshe says. Rav Moshe says when you change the oxygen tank, when it runs out, just don't replace it, and that's shei v'al taseh, and you're not withdrawing, you're just withholding. And if the patient's really dying and it's that bad, I'll tell them in between oxygen tanks, just don't replace it. Any problem with that?
No tanks.
Yeah, there's no tanks anymore. Rav Moshe wrote that tshuva in 1970. It's not nowadays. It's plugged into the wall. It's continuous oxygen. So I remember I told this rabbi. I said, Rabbi, it's plugged into the wall. There's no tank. He said, Oh no! What do I say? What am I going to say? I don't know. I have to be there 5 minutes. What do I tell them? So it's a big issue. That's a big issue. So, anyways, Rav Hoffner there at Weiner Yeshua said to me, I'm a Talmud. My father was a Talmud of Rav Moshe. We apply that tshuva to dialysis as well. Actually, Rav David Feinstein, when he was here in LA, he was here in LA for the reference wedding a few times ago. So I caught him and I went up to him and I had all my shilas for him. Probably annoyed him too much, but I got a lot of shilas to him. And I said to him, this has been said in your father's name about allowing dialysis in between cycles, not to restart it if the patient is dying and they're suffering. And I'm curious, do you think, was this really the position of Rav Moshe? He said, I get this shilah all the time, and that's what I say as well. So it's a machlokes, but another interesting one to discuss. Any questions or comments about any of this? Wrap up in a second. Yeah.
I just want to say, my father has COPD.
Yeah.
Very advanced. In the past 12 years, he was put on a respirator and do stoma for about, I think, 6 or 7 times. And every time he has a reason, he comes back.
Yeah. See, it's important. It's important to know that there are not to give up too quickly. Exactly. Let me talk about 2 last things, and I'll wrap up, and I'll turn it over. Right. What's the room finish? 12:05. So I see how fast I can talk. I'll just end there. We'll just end that. So I don't go on. Okay. So two last things, just to be aware of. One thing is DCD organ donation. There's lots of organ donation. Personally, I believe organ donation is a huge mitzvah. In many cases, it's a beautiful thing. In certain cases, living donors, donating a kidney, for example, pekuach nefesh, it could save lives. Cadaveric organ donation, there's instances where it can also be very important. DCD organ donation is one of the most common methods of organ retrieval, and you should be aware of it because it's halachically very problematic. The way DCD organ donation works is that a patient is determined that they have no chance of recovery, but they're alive. They're not brain dead, they're alive, but the doctor determined no chance of recovery. And the family or the patient has determined that they want to donate organs. So they take the patient to the operating room, prep them for surgery, and extubate and wait. And if they die, they start surgery. If they don't die, they reintubate, bring them back to the operating room. There's a story about this. Remind me another time, I'll tell you the story because it'll take me 3 minutes to tell the story. But it's something to be aware of. The last thing to be aware of that I'll just conclude with is surrogate decision making. One of the most common shilas that we have lately is making decisions on behalf of incapacitated patients. We have a lot of homeless patients at Cedars-Sinai, or patients who don't have any family, and they come into the hospital, and we have to figure out how to make decisions for a patient who we don't even know their name. And how do we make decisions when there's lots of different options? So this is another issue to be aware of, and lots to say about it, and we'll save that for another occasion. But again, thank you all for listening. Keep up the incredible learning. May be the halacha v'lo l'maisa, as they say. We should just know b'suras tovos and good health. Amen.
Amen. Shkaya, thank you very much.